Record check. Yes.
Yeah. Check, 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 check. Check, check, check.
Good afternoon, ladies and gents. If you can't hear me, feel free to come on in. I want to start up front with some announcements. For those seeking your continuing education unit credits, there is an individual in the back, John, if you don't mind raising your hand. He will be checking you out on your way out so that you can get those credits. I've been told that I have to keep you here for an hour. For that, I apologize, but we'll go from there. That said, I also know it is after lunch. If you decide you want to take a nap, I'm not going to fault you. It's late in the day. Secondly, if you would rather watch something by my boss, please feel free. I feel like I need to say that because she is my boss. She's over in the main hall. But if you're here to talk about data and how it converges with intelligence, I'm here for you. So as a poll, who actually knows what JFHQ-DODIN is? Raise your hands. Surprising number. I'm actually really happy about that. For those who don't know, JFHQ-DODIN is one of the three legs of United States Cyber Command. Whereas one leg, the JFHQ sees, does offensive operations, our partners in the Cyber National Mission Force form a second leg and do defensive response actions. We do internal defensive mission. The basic idea is that we are the shield of the Department of Defense. Every single network out there, all the way across, all 43 AOs that we calculate, we're in charge of defending. That said, I am embedded within there as the technical director for J2, for intelligence. We're going to talk about a lot how intelligence has not come up to standards in revolving to cyber, specifically with cyber operations in this briefing. None of it should be shocking. A lot of it's probably disappointing, but there is some hope on the horizon. With that said, let's go ahead and begin. So, anybody who's worked intelligence in the past should be intimately familiar with the intelligence cycle. It's that up there on the top. It all starts with planning and direction. Your commander tells you what they need, moves into collection, so trying to quantify exactly what the commander or the operator needed so that you actually get the information you need. That information is then processed and exploited. In the case of imagery, maybe it's tagged with significant items. In the case of signals, maybe it's a phone call that's listened to with important pieces pulled out. That information is then passed to somebody who does analysis on it and puts it in context of what exactly has occurred. And then finally, that is disseminated or sent out to the important bodies to start the process at the beginning again. It's still valid. It is still an important cycle. But due to the unique nature of cyber, quite frankly, we've had to update it. Across the bottom, you'll see a model that we're calling data to decision making. We start with data and move all the way through to decision. And when we say decision, we're not just talking about what we expect our commander to make. We're talking all the way down to the network operator and mission assurance body and their ability to actually address the problems they see on a day-to-day basis. What changes? So in intelligence, a lot of the focus is on collection, right? We have to get an important body in somewhere to go and collect some secret piece of information that's going to change how we fight war. We have to get that important person who's going to report back to a spy what happened. We have to get that bug in that place where we're going to be able to listen to what occurred. We have to get that satellite overhead who's going to take that image. We don't have that problem in cyber. I will tell you now, the biggest problem I face on a day-to-day basis is not a lack of information, it is being overwhelmed by information. So I mentioned up front that I work at JFHQ-DODIN. Notionally, I get cyber defensive data from every sensor across the Department of Defense. To give you an idea of the quantity of that, if I'm just talking DISA, which is one of my primary data sources, that's 10 IAPs, Internet Access Points, that provide 3 to 4 petabytes of data on a week-to-week basis. That's 1 out of 43 organizations. Now, that's not to say all those organizations produce the same level of data. Quite frankly, a lot of them produce a lot less. But it's still a significant amount of data that I'm expected to go through. In the classic intelligence picture, what is then spent after that data is collected is a long time trying to deal with how we process it. I like to think that intelligence was solving the big data problem back before it was a recognized problem. They were solving it back in the 50s when we had NSA deploying sensors globally who were listening into all these phone conversations, and they did the best they could with limited compute power. They threw people at it. On average, I would say that a piece of intelligence that I receive has been touched by at least 6 to 7 individuals before it gets to me, as an all-source analyst myself. That means that it takes usually somewhere in the range of 6 months. So we detect an IOC through a clandestine sensor, and then 6 months later it makes it to my hot little hands, where I then pass it to my J3 and expect them to be acting against it. I think everybody here who works cyber knows that that's ridiculous, right? Our enemies are changing on a second-to-second basis, and I'm handing them data that's 6 months old. We've quickly discovered this cycle doesn't work. So we've been adapting. We've been adapting, and we've been adapting quickly. We've realized that we have to focus on data, analytics, and then providing a risk-based calculation. We can no longer just provide threat. That said, if we can, actually I have a button, don't I? So the current situation. DODIN overall, I'm going to try to be humble about this, is doing an amazing job with limited resources. I will tell you up front that our J2, minus our contracting force, is a whole 12 people. That is 12 people for the entire Department of Defense, 28 organizations that don't have their own native intelligence that we have to provide for them, because there's no one else. For those not aware, the Department of Defense is not an enterprise network. It is not. At last count, we had 800 plus unique sensors scattered across the DODIN doing defensive mission. 43 different networks, numerous big data platforms, 17 intelligence agencies, 6 different U.S. Cyber Command subcomponents, and uncountable commercial data sources, and a partridge in a pear tree. These data sources are not connected, they're not conditioned, and by conditioned I mean put into a common lexicon. They're not clean by any means, and they're not designed to interoperate. Analytics as a concept is no longer just an option for us, it has become a necessity. This patchwork of governance, so leading back to this, there's a patchwork of data governance policies. Lots of concerns regarding security, transportation, storage, usage, analysis, and how that data is displayed. Beyond that, we also have a lack of understanding across the department, especially in our senior levels, as to what exactly cyber means. That's only been confused further by, I hate to say it, reactionism that occurs when one bad thing happens on the network and it gets run directly up the pipe to our most senior leaders. On top of which, there is a fundamental disconnect between Klinger-Cohen and Goldwater-Nichols. Fun fact, we can tell people how to defend themselves. We can put parentheses on how they're supposed to build things, but we can't tell them what to buy. As the operational side, we can only say, hey, we want you to defend yourself in this kind of way, and beyond that, it's on them. So we get to the intelligence issue. I will tell you as an all-source analyst, I am used to working at and I must say it in the most polite way possible, a deliberate pace. Take that as you will. It might as well read slow. We work on 2 fundamental concepts that have been instituted since 9/11, specifically Intelligence Community Directive 203 and Intelligence Community Directive 206. These 2 items dictate that 1, we have to tell you how we did our work, how we got to our math, and what our confidence level is in it. And then secondly, I have to cite where I pulled all my sources, similar to like when you write a term paper. That way you as a person can go through and understand exactly how I came to my conclusion. In addition to which, all source analysts are not used to dealing with what is considered raw data. Raw data means data that has not been processed in such a way that it's easily understandable. The vast majority of intelligence that I dealt with when I was an all-source analyst is what we would commonly call message traffic. It's written in the same format we've been using since 1983, usually translated into a text document, and then handed to me, and I would read those messages. I specialized in the Middle East, and I would read something like 300 to 600 messages a day, and then I would cobble them together to try to make a picture. That's your classic all-source intelligence analyst. I will tell you that does not work for cyber. There's also a poor understanding among the all-source analytics career field, specifically dealing with technical data, and lack of understanding of that data leads to a lack of confidence in that data. A prime example I will give you is even when I deal with my analysts at JFHQ-DODIN, I give them access to these giant repositories of data, these big data platforms. I sign the 2875, I make sure they have the capability, I do my best to train them on it. But even I cannot tell you what those exact data sources were, what they produce exactly, how that data was parsed, how it actually got stored, and then what the periodicity is on that data. I am not alone in this. I will tell you that seems to be a common problem across the DODIN writ large with all of my fellow analysts. But I, as an intelligence analyst, am told that I have to speak truth to power. I have to be able to say with some level of confidence what exactly my analysis says. How am I expected to do that when I don't even know what my sources were like? On top of that, I will also tell you intelligence analysts are not perfect bodies. I am far from perfect. We like to set our own self-programmed boundaries. Call them mission, call them scope, call them what you will. But every single intelligence body you talk to will tell you this is my lane in the road and this is all I touch. Some of my favorites are, I work at DIA, why do I need access to Air Force data? That's Blue Force data, I only do threat. And that is just junk. I would not want to do that, give that to somebody at NSA. All of these are things that I've heard. All of these go counter to what we've been told to do by the department and the Joint Staff. Joint Pub 102 defines all source analysis as using all sources of available data. Not intelligence, data. Intelligence is defined specifically as being data that has been conditioned or exploited to actually become intelligence. It's something that has analysis against it. Okay, so data. I love data. I'm up here tapping my podium. It's kind of sad. So, we have some governance issues, right? Some serious governance issues. Nobody can tell me who owns what. Nobody. I mean, marking so I can go to DISA and I can tell you within DISA's own data holdings, at least 3 entities are going to tell me that they own that data. At least 3. And it's that way at every single organization around the department. I, because I work at a joint organization, like to say, that means the department owns it all, gimme, because I like data. But that raises serious questions, right? What should I have access to? How is that data formatted? What is the data source's interconnectivity? Sometimes I can find that out and sometimes I can't. I will tell you more often than not I can't. Because quite frankly, a lot of times these organizations were they will have structures that were built by somebody who retired 10 years ago. And they've just updated the parts in the system without actually understanding how the system completely functions. So by the time I get around to actually trying to look at it, I'm playing guess who as to where that actually goes. There's also, and I would like to say positively, a gathering understanding of data at all levels. People no longer question why we can only function at endpoint and at IAP. People understand that we have to understand the interconnectivity between all the pieces. And just because it's complex and hard does not mean we should not do it. That's a good thing. That means we're getting closer to understanding ourselves, which means we're closer to understanding how the enemy is hitting us. And then finally, there is also a dawning idea that we need to understand our data sources. We have to get specified training in for analysts on both the operations and intelligence side so that they understand the sources of their data to include how it was conditioned before they received it. Storage. How fast am I moving? Ooh, I need to slow this down. I'm just going to go ahead and say, if you guys have questions, go ahead and ask them on the way. That way we can kind of pace this out, because otherwise you're going to get real bored of me talking. Storage. So every day I find a new space where data has been stored. Every day. Every day I talk to somebody and I find out that somebody else has tucked away some little piece of important data somewhere else. That's good. It's real good. I'll be honest. When I first took over this job, I was contacting organizations and being like, great, how much data do you have on hand? And they'd be like, 96 hours. I didn't even know what to do with 96 hours of data. I just looked at them like, I can't do a trend on that. I can't do any sort of analysis on that. 96 hours. Great. Organizations are getting better. We've been working closely with United States Cyber Command to establish interconnectivity. We're finally getting to a point where we're going to have a distributed query capability, hopefully between the various BDPs that we've discovered. Beyond that, however, and intelligence specific, we have some serious questions to ask ourselves. How long should Intel store data? I don't know the answer to that. I mean, so I look in the world and I try to go, okay, how much data did I need to store to understand Edward Snowden and his activities? How much do I need to understand Manning? How much do I need to understand any of our counterintelligence threats? What kind of user activity do I need to be monitoring? How long do I have to store that? Counterintelligence concerns. The fact of the matter is state to state, depends. 5, 7 years? 5 to 7 years worth of data for the entire DoD? How does that work out? I don't know the answers. These are questions that the DoD has to answer. These are questions that USDI is working on. And then finally, as an Intel analyst, how comfortable am I dealing with PII? I say that because as a computer network defense individual, I know for a fact that I can look through almost everything that is being passed through the internet across the DoD. I can look at every email. I can look at every piece of documentation. In one shape, way, form, or another, I can get access to all that data. I have an ethics consideration for that. I'm an Intel guy. How do I deal with that? And then how do I get my analysts to deal with it? I don't want them to lose access to the data because there might be critical information there that'll help them understand exactly how to better defend ourselves. But at the same time, trying to mask delete or mask items across is going to hose my ability to do any sort of processing, let alone my ability to do analytics. How do I deal with it? Near and dear to my heart, analytics. So we want to maintain those standards. We want to maintain ICD 203 and 206. We want to be able to show our homework. However, the amount of data means that analysts have to have some faith in automated systems. You can't have faith in a system unless you understand that system. How do we get analysts to a point where they understand what is being analyzed, how it's being analyzed, and then what is being produced? I argue that we have to start with data understanding, right? Start with the base building block. Get them to understand what a firewall is. This is how a firewall is formed. This is what a firewall produces. This is what we save. This is what we don't save. This is what you could have. This is what you don't have. From there, we have to move into the ability to get them to understand, and I'll be honest, I have a hard time understanding it, complex data science models. There are programs that'll run them all day for us. I know that. I've seen them in action. But I, as an analyst, need to understand what they're doing. I have to be able to turn to whatever level of leadership and say, yea, verily, I stake my name on that. Because that's what it is, ladies and gents. At the end of the day, I need to be able to turn to all the way up to the president and say, I put my name on that, sir. You can take faith in my word and that you can take action on it. We also realize we need more complex analytics. So we've been working closely with JAKE, the Joint AI Center, another a sister organization within the DISA umbrella that we work closely with who's been moving towards AI. I will be upfront and say that I don't think we are anywhere near AI. I think that I will be comfortable in saying we are developing analytics and we have initial machine learning capabilities, but I am not ready to say that I have seen a true AI capability yet. We're getting there, though. Slowly but surely. We also have to move past this idea that we have to identify indicators of compromise. So if you go and talk to my network defense colleagues, the vast majority of what they do is they take an IOC, they put it in some kind of system that then stops that IOC from being enacted or happening. right? Some indicator of compromise. It might be blocking an email, it might be blocking an IP address, it might be blocking a signature that we've identified with an email. It might be any number of things. But the fact of the matter is if we're working with IOCs, that's already happened. We already missed that train. That one's long past the station and well down the road. At that stage, we're cleaning up spilled milk. We're trying to gather horses, put them back in the barn. I can keep going with the metaphors. We have to get to a point where we're understanding the patterns of activity that individuals do. I'm sure like everybody else, I'm a creature of habit. I wake up every morning, stumble my way downstairs, make some coffee, put out the dogs, get my coffee, take my medication, go and watch CNN, eventually think about showering and get going to work, right? I do that every single day. I'm pretty sure my counterpart in China does the same thing, or something similar. How do I translate that into a behavioral-based analytic that I can put against, say, NetFlow, so I can catch him in the act? So that when he's conducting a phishing activity against the DODIN, when he's pushed that button on his mass distributor on his end, that I catch it as it's coming in and I immediately block against it. How do I feed those patterns to my network defenders instead of just feeding them IOCs? And how is that done in a methodology that's going to not blow our defensive capabilities processing power? Strangely enough, I just went through all my bullets and I didn't realize it. Good job me. That said, those who are seeking additional information, what I have up there on the slide is the diamond model. Who knows the diamond model? There is a wonderful paper out on the internet. Just do a search for the diamond model of intrusion set analysis. It's one of the primary methodologies we use to formulate exactly how we track threat activity across, well, most computer networks, to be honest. At the top, you'll see adversary, which is the bad guy. To the right, capability. To the bottom, victim. And to the left, infrastructure. The paper does a much better job explaining it, but almost every computer network's defense event can be broken down into a diamond, which then lets you start to figure out a pattern of activity. So display. I spent like 10 years writing book reports. I am really good at writing book reports. I mean, seriously, like I read 300 to 600 pieces of message traffic every day. I collected them like a little squirrel preparing for winter, tucked them away in a little file folder, and eventually I had enough pieces where I could go and write a paper. And then I'd put it in some sort of enticing format. I mean, sometimes it was boring and it was like an intelligence review, but sometimes it was a PDB for the president. That's cool. They were all book reports. That is the classic methodology through which intelligence, all source intelligence, does dissemination. It also does not work for cyber. Remember at the beginning I said it took 6 months to get to a point where I was actually receiving the data on my desktop? I'm going to put another 2 months on top of that while I go through my publishing process. That's what happens. I'm going to spend 2 months collecting little nuts of data, and then I'm going to put them together into a neat little report, and I'm going to send it through my chain, who's going to spend a crap ton of time reviewing it until they've wordsmithed the crap out of it, and then they're going to give it to a senior. Or to an operator. Or warfighter, or whatever name we're calling for our customer at this time. So now we've gone from a 6-month process to an 8-month process. It doesn't work. The DCO community recognizes it is too slow. I can tell you now, I love my J3. He is a hard charger. He is working super hard, but he has told me to my face that if he has to choose between operating on commercial data that nobody's reviewed and operating on something I'm providing him 6 months later, he's taking the commercial data. That's the reality of it. My own process has made me irrelevant. So what do we have to move towards? What we're moving towards in DODIN, at least, is dynamicism. We're moving away from writing book reports and instead taking the STIX methodology and actually filling in the form. Who's familiar with STIX here? Anybody? So STIX is a universally recognized standard for data communications and data tagging. You can get it via RSS or JSON if you go STIX 2.0. It's not just for IOCs. It lets you put additional data around those IOCs and broadcast them through a methodology that lets you share it in a free and quick method. We're moving towards a period where we're no longer going to be able to say we can watch every sparrow's fall, because we can't. We can't watch every sparrow's fall. We can instead build analytics that help us watch for every sparrow, and then we can also act like fishermen on a stream. We're moving towards a period where we're going to have analysts who sit on the banks, they catch a fish, they catch an IOC, they tag it with the information that we can find surrounding it, and they throw that fish back. Over time, that will let us build out a pattern of IOCs that lets us develop a pattern. So instead of passing the IOCs, which we will continue to do, we can then start to build out a dynamic pattern of activity that lets us see exactly what that fingerprint looked like, and then how that fingerprint can be passed to our operators to defend against. We need to do it in a dynamic method. We also need to merge it with our other fields of warfare. Cyber doesn't happen all on its own. We have to be able to showcase it in light of air, sea, ground. We have to be able to show how our enemy is doing a coordinated attack against us in a wartime environment. I did miss a point, and I apologize. We also need to make sure we're coordinating across our own computer network defense enterprise so that we're not just throwing threat. Threat is just one aspect of the whole. Okay, so decision. Threat is an aspect of the whole. I'm sure many of you have seen this before. It's pretty textual based. It's the risk equation. It's got some fun things on top and bottom, but at the end of the day, it's the risk equation, right? Traditionally, as an Intel guy, I specialize in that far left column, that threat column. It doesn't entirely work anymore. And the reason it doesn't work anymore is because of the way our systems are built. A vulnerability is just as bad as the bad guy who will take advantage of it. If I, as an Intel analyst, don't understand that vulnerability, I have a problem. If I, as an Intel analyst, don't also understand the importance of a system, we have a problem. I cannot quantify threat if I do not understand what is important. I can't. Back in the day, it used to be pretty easy, right? F16, you don't want the F16 to get hit. That's your critical node, F16. Bad guys have, SA3s. That's your bad guy. All I had to do was understand how is that bad guy using that SA3 and why is he using it, right? Capability times intent. That's my threat picture. If I understood that, I told the guy flying the F-16, watch out for X, Y, and Z. Today we live in a world where the F-16 pilot is not an F-16 pilot anymore. It's a mission assurance analyst located at, say, DFAS, who's overlooking an entire network of systems, him and maybe his 5 or 6 other colleagues who are on watch, who are expected to understand millions of F-16s, and then understand exactly how that enemy is going to hit his millions of F-16s. He has to be able to prioritize for me what is the most important piece in that F-16 architecture. I have to understand that so that when I'm looking at my threat actor, I can tell you what's going to happen and what's bad. That's part of my job. Part of my job is to be predictive, is to understand what the enemy's going to do and why. That why is critical. It's also important because I mentioned up front that we have an issue with our most senior leaders not understanding what exactly they're looking at when we give it to them, right? That's why something like a fishing expedition can get channeled all the way up to the SecDef and end up in his read book. They don't understand why that's not a big deal or how that happens every day, and they have automated sensors that are blocking it for them. They don't get that. And sometimes it gets slewed in such a way that that senior leader thinks that they're being directly targeted, even though they were just one of thousands that were potentially targeted along with everybody else. That's an Intel analyst's failure. We have to get better about reporting that as well. Beyond that, it is also imperative that we not just provide them with a threat-based picture. If I am just feeding threat to the DoD CIO, I am failing the DoD CIO because I'm going to feed him, say, 7 or 8 reports on a day-to-day basis, and then I'm going to expect him to interpret and understand for the entire Department of Defense why those are important. I can't do that. If I was in his shoes, I'd be hosed. We're supposed to have analysts that do that. That's part of their job, and we have to get to the point where we break down those walls between intel and ops so that we're providing a holistic picture. I've done my best to slow this down, and Lord, we still have 30 minutes left, ladies and gents, so I hope you have lots of questions. So in conclusion, all-source analyst is still developmental. 10 years later, we are still developmental. We're trying. Intel analysts need to realize that work cannot be conducted in a void. We have to work with others. They cannot let their antisocial tendencies defeat their ability to do their job. Although great strides have been made in the creation of what we're commonly calling fusion analyst, further development needs to be met. It cannot just be an ops guy and an intel guy sitting next to each other and passing ideas. We have to get to a point where all source intelligence is actively being produced. And then finally, it's important to realize that intelligence is a key player in decisions that are made. But intelligence cannot just pigeonhole themselves and call themselves intelligent and call it a day. They have to realize that they are one important part and a key cog within the entire machine. So that said, questions. Because I got to get you guys through 30 more minutes. Microphone up front. Anyone? Is it working?
It's on? Okay. Andrew Quill, I work with the Marine Forces Cyberspace Warfare Group. What open source frameworks or threat intelligence platforms or capabilities are you currently working to leverage within JFHQ-DODIN to enable that data tagging, data labeling, and co-location of all that collected stuff? And what is the focus on? Have you already identified what the right data is, or is it we're just going to collect everything and figure it out later?
Okay, so the first part. Thank you, sir. First part. We currently primarily leverage DISA's BDP Gold Standard, which includes a lexicon capability that's built into it, which includes the ability to dynamically tag data within a system called SITE. We are pushing to have that built into the unified platform concept for United States Cyber Command, with the idea of finally getting to a point where we have a universal IOC repository for the entire department. And yes, I know in my briefing I said we're trying to get away from IOCs, which we are. But in order to get away from IOCs, we have to have a fuller understanding of how those IOCs play with each other. For the longest time, we've been dependent on this idea that we have an intrusion set, which is for those unaware, an intrusion set is not an actor. An intrusion set is a working name that's given to a group of given to an entity that we don't quite know what it is, but so we put all the stuff together and we roughly correlate it into something. I could be an intrusion set. My ability to do DDoS could be an intrusion set. It is not an individual. What we're pushing towards is hopefully with understanding of universal IOCs is to get to the point where we can build those patterns so that we understand threats as an individual, not as an intrusion set. We want to get to a point where we understand what an individual within China may have come after us with, as opposed to a rough group of indicators that we have roughly associated to him and 12 of his colleagues. So that said, we're using that commercial standard that DISA provides us to do that and pushing in that direction. What was the second part of your question? I'm sorry, I got that down the path. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, how much? Yeah, where we're storing it. So as far as tagging and labeling, as I mentioned, we've been using SITE. During the last election cycle, we actually sent out an order to all of DODIN asking that for every significant activity report that is filed, that they include relevant IOCs at the unclassified level. Within site, we then store it within there, and then we pull that out in a sticks-based format. We actively share that information across to our colleagues at DHS, who then pass it through automated indicator sharing, which has the advantage of, one, providing us with our universal IOC repository with properly tagged data, but two, letting us help to defend the rest of the United States and their electoral system so that they can actually defend during an election period. Win-win. Now, as far as what data we're actually pulling, that is the hard part. So we've had lots of attempts to try to understand, but part of the reason I harp on education so much is the fact that I can give a good example. One of our analysts came to us and said, hey, I need DNS logs. Can you get me DNS logs? I said, sure, let me try that. Lo and behold, I didn't have to go out and get a special capability. One of our sensors already did that. But at some point in like the far past, another analyst said, oh, we don't need that, so they stopped collecting it. We've since got that turned back on. But these are things where if our analysts had understood what our sensors can collect and how it's parsed and how it's stored, that wouldn't be a question. Like, they would have come up front and said, here's a list of everything I need you to turn on. By the way, here's a list of things that I don't need. We just don't have those stores yet because all the systems were built like 10, 12 years ago, and they've just been refreshed as time goes on. Does that answer your question? That got us 7 more minutes, folks. Hi, sir. Come on up to the mic, sir. Yeah, they should be available on the site, and if not, come. Okay, we'll do. Or come get my business card. I'm more than happy to pass them. No problem, sir. Sir.
So one of the valuable things that you were going at was what's a firewall, but also like why do I need DNS data? What's valuable about response inquiries and stuff in DNS? And some of that stuff is published in the RFCs, but some of that stuff is just in the open source, right? So you have to, SANS and some other folks put that stuff together smartly in a way that we can consume it as analysts. And then, it's up to the IT to figure out how to translate that into, when I parse a DNS record, what am I parsing and why, and how am I parsing it? So
Yes.
Through that life cycle that you mentioned from an IT side through the analysis chain, again, there's I think part of it is because we as a community take stuff from all these disparate sources, because when we find something good, we're like, hey, this is good, and then we share it. Pyramid of pain. Hey, this is good. Share it to everybody, right? And that becomes kind of a thing that becomes in our ether on how we all as analysts work. So I'm just, again, wondering what your thoughts are on that kind of stuff of, when there isn't a commercial kind of come together on all of this stuff, although we're getting much, much better with MITRE ATT&CK and, Sigma and things like that. What do you think?
So my thought is that, so first, that's a great question. So firstly, I would say, I will also tell you when you said RFC first, my Intel brain kicked in and I was like, oh, request for collection? Because there's nothing like double acronyms all day long. That said, the big piece I think that we're coming to is I think there's the education piece, right? But we also, and you highlighted it, we need to get to a point where it's not a push-pull, right? Instead, what needs to be happening is, remember I mentioned the stream and I'm fishing for the fish and I'm tagging it and throwing it back? There needs to be a system in which after I've tagged that fish, if it's something you care about, something that you've tailored your system to look for, because we're all playing in the same data pond, that it flags on your system, right? Something has happened and this is important to me. We actually see that with some of the operational systems now. That's what a lot of SIMs do, right? If something critical happens to the network, it flags up and the guy on the floor has to go and take a look at it. We need to get to a point where we do that for analysts, especially if they're doing like a hunt or longer term analytic mission, so that when something happens, they know to go and look for it. Does that answer your question? Yes. Okay. Who's next? Make it long, sir. We got 20 minutes.
No, not really too long. Just from your experience and from your knowledge, and if you just had things your particular way, what would be your ideal solution? I'm asking this question because I'm just trying to get a perspective.
Oh no,
on
you're cool.
Your experience, you know what I mean?
So in a perfect world,
yeah,
in Leo Gentile's perfect world, so let me go ahead and separate that from my organizational perfect world. In Leo Gentile's perfect world, we all operate on an enterprise system. We all have the same sensors at the periphery. All those systems put out the exact same data types in a known logical format in which that data is fed to a centralized system where it parses in the exact same way. I have infinite amounts of storage, high-powered computing, and the ability to run high-powered analytics, machine learning, and AI against it, which gets me to a point where I'm actually just having to monitor a system and push a button as opposed to having to actively sit there and dig for days on end to try to find when something bad has happened.
Thank you.
Who's next? Come on, guys. We got to push it. And ladies, I'm sorry. I did not mean to come off as sexist in any way, shape, or form. Okay. Yes.
So I had a question about the ever-evolving tool sets we've seen now in the machine learning and AI realms and everything. And kind of coming from a historical and analytical background, how do you have the confidence in what that machine is putting out in the end in order to put your name on it to send it up the chain?
Well, and that's the problem, right? In an ideal world, so the way that we're currently working the system, at least at DODIN, is that we've created a fusion team, which previously has been Intel and operators, and they sit next to each other, hold hands, kumbaya. We're now working to implement where we have a data scientist built in as well. I am not saying that's the perfect solution. I do not want the perfect solution to be 3 people all sitting around and holding hands to come to a solution. Let's be honest, that's manpower ridiculous. That said, that's how we're currently working through that confidence problem, right? You have a data scientist who you trust, who is taking the question that you've asked, formulating it into the correct method and correct form to get the answer you need, and then putting that question into the system so that you receive back the data you need. That's far from perfect. I would like to get to a point where there is some sort of merging of those worlds, I guess is the best way to phrase it. I'm not saying I want to turn analysts into data scientists or vice versa. I think that there are clear specialties there and clear understandings that will never fully merge. But I would like for analysts as part of their tradecraft to understand what they're looking at when they look at some of the concepts involved and to understand exactly how the data scientist does their job and vice versa. I would like for a data scientist to, I hate to say it, come to us so fresh-faced that they have no clue about what's going on, which I've had. Like, I have a limited pool of data scientists, and every single one of them come to me and say, what exactly do you do here? It would be great if they would understand, and there would be some sort of understanding between the two of how each other work, because I think it forms a better working relationship. It also enables an analyst to better understand how data science is conducted. The other thing that would be nice is for us to get to a point where analytics are more modular than they are now. Bless their hearts. I watch some of my analysts type out queries, and I just look at them, and it's just like paragraphs of question. I mean, mind you, don't get me wrong. I'm old school. I remember having to type Boolean logic in to like get an answer out of message traffic. I do. I get it. But that's not like the best way, and that's not going to help anybody to actually formulate a complex question. I need something more simple. I need to be able to take some GS9 or some A1C and sit them down at their desk and be like, okay, kid, you don't know, I'm not asking you to write Shakespeare, but let's do some Mad Libs. And step them through an analytic where they can actually formulate a complex question with individualized pieces to make a more complex question to get to the answer they need. Does that make sense?
Yeah, then I also wanted to know your opinion on kind of, or at least what you see from like a generational aspect, like the older analysts versus the new kind of millennial.
Oh, Jesus. Pardon. Sorry.
Well, you wanted to fill up some time. So.
I got it. So I will tell you, I've gone through a lot of battles in my day, and I'm still fighting a lot of battles, especially regarding some of the previous generation of analysts. It's not that everybody doesn't mean well, because they do. It's just a question of how resources are being spent and how they're being focused. Does that answer the question in the most political way possible? Thank you for throwing that bomb. 15 minutes, ladies and gents. 15 minutes.
So to keep going off of that, with your data scientist on shift, data scientist sits down with the analyst, works out exactly how to go to the platform and ask a question and get a result. Mm-hmm. When they do that, right, from a continuity standpoint, from a knowledge management standpoint, what are the ways that you're ensuring that that time is not lost from both a description standpoint of that analytic? So data scientist does this work, and we have a standardized way of documenting that analytic.
So we're doing it in a few ways. Firstly, related to data, we have constantly rotating and updating data lexicons. As far as training is concerned, we put it into the Persistent Cyber Training Environment, PCTE. For those who have not seen that, that is a cross Cyber Command concept where you can actually go in and view training that's been conducted by a number of people. So every time we host a class, we ask for it to be recorded and then upload it to PCTE. And then beyond that, we actually operate with Cyber Command pretty heavily as far as making sure that analytics are built in such a way that they are equally usable by all. So we use agreed upon language, so agreed upon coding language, but we also use agreed upon documentation that then is stored within a universal analytics storehouse to be shared across the cyber mission force writ large. I'm not going to say it's perfect because I can tell you how Shakespeare is written. That doesn't mean I actually was in Shakespeare's shoes when he wrote it. Same thing with any analytic, but it does get us to a point where we have proper documentation and we are saving the analytic. The key point I want to highlight there is the fact that, remember how I mentioned that we are not to AI yet? Because we're not. The only way you're going to get to AI is by building analytics. We have to be asking so many questions that we have to build systems that make the machine go out and ask all those questions in sequence for us. That is machine learning. We then have to have so much machine learning happening that we get to a point where the machine can do it itself. That is AI. If we don't build on those, we will never get to that AI dreamscape, right? So by having a universal analytics store, we can start to share those analytics to build towards that machine learning capability, which will get us to AI. "13 more minutes. Anybody? Absolutely, sir. Go for it. Yeah. Bless your heart. I got it. It doesn't get any better when it's a collection of kids fresh-faced from DIA. Yeah. So there's a few ways you can do it, and I've seen various... Oh, no, you're good. So there's a few ways you can do it, sir, that I've seen of varying successes. Put them on shift with your operators and make them actually go through the operation day to day. Oh, so you don't even have them on active duty. So you can't even send them to JNAC. Joint Network Attack Center down in Pensacola. It's a 2 week. I think it's a 2 week course now. 2 weeks. So there's a course down in Pensacola. The Navy hosts it. It's a joint course, absolutely. So what that will do is that teaches in the OCO side of the house. As a CPT, that may not completely check your box as far as what you're looking for, but it gets you there. So what I want to do is I'm going to collect your card, sir. I'm going to put you in contact. Have you talked to Major Bill Walker? So Major Bill Walker is our Guard Reserve liaison. Fun fact, I would say somewhere in the realm of 85% of our JDOC J2 personnel are Guard and Reserve. But he's the one who goes out and recruits him and actually knows exactly how he's getting him trained and getting him set to do mission. So he'll be a vast help to you. 2 week course. That's one. It's about a 4 month wait. I mean, so I will tell you the vast disappointment that is we send a lot of our guys to get civilian credits, so A+, Net+, Security+, And it doesn't check the box. I know it doesn't. And we face this similar issue with our CPTs that are native in-house. Like I said, I think your best bet, if not Major Walker, then I will also point you to, I'll get you his contact information. He's a lieutenant commander, but he's in charge of our CPT forces. And he'll be able to help you out. No problem, sir. 7 minutes. Come on, guys. 7. We can do this. I want to get you your credits.
I'll ask this from a purely technical curiosity. So you mentioned taking IOCs.
You got to talk up, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. You mentioned ingesting IOCs. You do the crunch. You put them through sticks over to Homeland Security, and then they'll put them out through AIS or whatever they're doing.
Yeah.
Can you ingest?
Yes. So if you read part of that order, the back end of it was that we asked everybody to subscribe to AIS. Now, I will tell you, AIS, you have the ability to do it a few ways. We currently ingest it into the BDP so that we have it stored on hand.
What's BDP?
Say again?
What's BDP?
Big data platform. Our case, it's on-prem, but for the vast majority of the services, it's service-based cloud, AWS usually. But it's a big data storage platform. DISA has the gold standard for it. So we store it in our storage mechanism, but you do have the ability to set it up so your sensors can directly ingest if you so choose. There are problems with that, though, because I will tell you, like, the way AIS works is they take everything, so sometimes that can be trash in, trash out. But there's a lot of gold to be found in there if you take a look, especially since you're receiving sensor data from commercial industry, SLTT entities, state, local, tribal, territorial, as well as from other federal agencies. So there's a lot of gold to be found in there.
Very good. Thank you.
No problem, sir. 6 minutes. I saw some of those size. Okay. Because I like to talk about it. Diamond model. So I mentioned previously that the diamond model can be applied to any specific incident. The cool part about it is you want to make a string of diamonds. The thing is although that string of diamonds can be applied in the methodology that the diamond model assigns, you can apply it to almost any attack model, any current model that is being hindered out there. MITRE attack, diamond model can be applied as an example. It's one of the ways that we're using to create that fingerprint, right? So if we go through and we create that string of diamonds, it lets us see exactly how an actor actually did their action. It also gives us the ability, especially as intelligence analysts, to take better advantage of clandestine sources. So rather than me going back and saying, hey, NSA, tell me everything bad guys did, I can instead say, hey, NSA, here's an IP address. Tell me everything you can about that IP address, which is a much more effective way of running intelligence than it is trying to say, tell me everything, right? John, how much longer do I have to keep them? You going to give them credit? Yes? One last question then.
So just on that diamond model, right, where you come up with the string, where you have actual evidence of the string of diamonds,
Yeah.
right? A lot of the reporting now is saying that these APTs are basically picking and choosing. So once these techniques come out, they're kind of bundling them. So APT1 is not doing what APT20, and APT29 start to look a lot like each other in some of the things that they're doing. That's maybe not the best example, but...
Well, no, so what it is, so you create that fingerprint, right?
Right.
But that thumb, as an example, could be 7 or 8 IOCs that we have associated. So it could be like a roulette, right?
Right.
You spin the wheel. Did it reach this? Okay, cool. Let's go to point 2. Spin the wheel. Did it reach any of those? Spin the wheel. Did it reach any of those? So you start to build it out. You get into a problem of probability, which is why a lot of the data science models out there are good because they run various competitive models against each other to get you to a best solution, which is one of the better ways I've seen specifically machine learning applied to get you to that solution. Okay. That said, thank you, ladies and gents, for coming to my talk. I think I promised a number of people yesterday during the Meet the PM cards, so if you need cards, come and get them. If you have questions you didn't want to say in front of anybody, come to me. Thank you very much for coming. Absolutely, sir.